Hello everyone, my name is Negar Negar and today I'm going to talk about unlabeled efficient machine perception. There are some scientific evidences that optical vision has initially evolved over 500 million years ago. Development and evolution of optical vision had a vital impact on survival of many species, as their vision was helping them to escape the predators and catch the prey. The evolution of the vision led human visual perception to involve more than 50% of the cortex and the surface of the brain. So it was also expected to consider computer vision as an important step when the discussion and research around artificial intelligence start evolving. Computer vision was initiated in the 1960s. By a goal in mind, they wanted to actually have a step towards intelligent robots that mimic the human visual system. In the beginning, it actually didn't sound very hard to address, so they defined an undergrad summer project at MIT as attaching a camera to a computer and having it describe what it saw. But actually, it turned out that this is not as simple as a summer project, and we're still working on computer vision problems. So the problem initiated for the tasks involving robot vision, and it expanded to more computer vision problems. During the next decades, many mathematical analysis, quantitative and statistical aspects of computer vision was studied. Later, there were more design feature-based approaches, and finally, deep learning and the creation of large-scale datasets such as ImageNet was the root of addressing and advancing significantly in many computer vision areas. But deep learning approaches often require large amount of label data. However, large-scale labeling, in particular when it involves human time, is very costly. There are many label-expensive tasks in computer vision. To name a few, consider the task of semantic segmentation and instance segmentation. For the task of semantic segmentation, we need to have class labels for all pixels of an image. And for the task of instance segmentation, not only the class label, but also the object instance that you're representing. Cityscape dataset is a dataset for the task of semantic segmentation. They estimated that it takes in average 1.5 hours per each Full HD image to be annotated for the task of semantic segmentation, and this is actually extremely expensive and costly. In addition, the distribution of the labels among available datasets is heavily skewed. There are many classes with few samples. However, many concepts share partial representations. What if we could have leveraged other data modalities and domains to assess the labels of some data? So we wanted to see if we can minimize the labeling effort while we are not sacrificing the performance. First, we wanted to see if a model can learn to automatically select which pixels a human annotator should annotate to get the best performance for the task of semantic segmentation, which is actually a very label-expensive task. Second, we wanted to see if we can exploit information from a domain that's much cheaper to acquire data from rather than annotating natural images. Here in particular, we consider the task of single-view 3D reconstruction and how to exploit synthetic data. Last, we wanted to actually employ information from another modality to help us addressing a visual problem. So in particular here, I will talk about a modality invariant representation that can help us inferring visual and haptic information that are partially available. But this actually could be applied for interaction between other modalities as well. So let's first talk about our first question for the task of semantic segmentation. We saw that semantic segmentation and annotating all pixels of an image could be very expensive. It can take up to 1.5 hours just for a single frame to be annotated. In addition, many available datasets are really imbalanced, and if we just start labeling the images one by one and back to back, we will end up having overrepresented classes such as sky and street, and many classes such as traffic light or bicycles will stay underrepresented. So here is the question. can an agent learn which region it should ask for the labels based on the nature of the dataset and the class imbalance in that specific dataset to get the maximum performance? To answer this question, we propose a reinforcement learning based active learning agent for semantic segmentation that's modeled with the DQN. The goal is to have the labeling as a function of data characteristics and class distribution that may vary across datasets. So let me briefly talk about the pipeline. In the beginning, we start with the segmentation network and the query network and an unlabeled set of images that are divided into small regions. Then the state is computed as a function of the segmentation network on the state set. The state set contains a few set-aside image regions to represent the entire unlabeled set. State is composed of features such as entropy maps of the segmentation predictions as well as the class frequencies for those regions in the state set. Then we uniformly sample k different pools of data from the unlabeled set to form our action pools. For each region in each pool, we compute its sub-action representation as a function of the entropy of the prediction, the class frequencies, and the KL divergence between class frequencies in the labeled set and the unlabeled sets. After that, the query network selects the actions which indicate a batch of regions to label. And then these regions are added into our labeled set. And we use these regions for training the segmentation network. At the end, the reward is computed as a segmentation performance across all classes. This process is repeated until we get to our predefined label budget. So let's a little bit talk about the results. Here is the qualitative results, and as you see, the last row presents our model, and the agent asks for labeling of the regions that are semantically more important in understanding the scene and are underrepresented. Also qualitatively, our oral-based active learning approach with 30% less label data can get the performance of our most competitive baseline. So here we are showing that with 30% less label, we can still get to the same performance. But semantic segmentation is not the only label expensive task in computer vision. Here we want to talk about the second question and see if we can use synthetic data that's much cheaper to acquire instead of labeling natural images. So here we are addressing the problem of single view 3D reconstruction. So we want to go from a single view natural image to generate a 3D reconstruction of it. Annotation of natural images for this task is extremely expensive and hard, if not possible, to go actually around the natural objects and took multiple pictures of it. In addition, this is actually an ill-posed problem, which means that multiple shapes can represent a 2D single view image. But actually we have access to the pairs of synthetic and 3D reconstruction of them. With the help of synthetic data and data-driven approaches, the field improved with a fast pace during the last few years. The high-level actually architecture of many of these deep learning approaches is like this. So during the training, there is an encoder that maps 2D rendered images into a Latin representation and a decoder that maps the Latin representation into a 3D object. And during the test time, a natural image is fed to the model. But the issue is that there is a domain shift between natural images and rendered images. In addition, actually, the generated shapes may not be realistic because this is an actually ill-posed problem. So here we address these two problems by employing adversarial training in two distinct ways. First, by imposing domain confusion between the rendered images and natural images, and second, by exploiting the shape features by enforcing the encoded 2D images to lie on the manifold of realistic object shapes. training has two steps. First, we train the shape autoencoder that's responsible for learning a rich Latin representation of 3D objects. This part is trained on 3D representation on the ShapeNet dataset, the full ShapeNet dataset basically. Once training converges, we freeze the parameters of the encoder and the decoder and use them in the reconstruction step. Stars here indicate the parameters of the encoder and decoder that are not actually updated during the next stage. So we'll freeze them and they're not updated. Second step is a 3D reconstruction network that's responsible for inferring the voxel grid from 2D rendered images. This is our reconstruction network. In a reconstruction network, two constraints are imposed on our embedding space with the help of two discriminators. We first impose features from natural images and rendered images to be domain invariant by employing domain confusion between these representations. Second, we impose the constraint by penalizing the model if the 2D embedding does not match points on the shape manifold. And this enforces the learned representation to lie in a rich shape manifold and being realistic. And our final loss function is a combination of all these terms. We compared our approach with the state-of-the-art approaches, and as you see here, the red bounding box shows the approaches that require more expensive labels compared to our approach. But still, we have either better or very competitive results with them. Note that we only use unlabeled natural images. Here is a T-SNE visualization of our features before and after training. We can see that our features become much more domain invariant after training. And during our experiment, we indeed observe a strong relationship between reconstruction performance on natural images and the development between and the overlap between synthetic and natural image features distributions. And the same thing holds actually for 2D rendered embedding and points from shape manifold before and after training. Here the takeaway message is that in many problems we can have access to information from cheaper to acquire domains, such as domains of synthetic images, and developing ways to exploit this information would save so much labeling and annotation time for us. So now let's see if we can acquire information from other available modalities. So we actually here so far we saw that we can use other domains, information from other domains, as well as acquiring active learning in order to be able to have more efficient data labeling. But now let's see if we can use information coming from other modalities to solve a visual problem. So humans actually learn in a multimodal way. Even for the tasks that are supposed to be unimodal, usually multiple modalities contribute. We can get information through multiple sensors, and some of this information converge in our brain to form a modality invariant representation. Now imagine we are holding a mug in our hand. Even if we can't see the whole mug and only have a partial observation of it, touching will give us enough information to imagine the mug in our mind. Even if we can't observe the mug at all, through only haptic information, we can probably still visualize and imagine the mug. Now let's see if we can have a robot that touches an object and generate a visual 3D representation of it. Or it can just have partial view of the object and limited haptic information and generate a 3D visual or haptic representation of it. To answer this question, we create an environment and a data set. Our samples are built by colored cubes that form non-trivial 3D objects. Every time we have a single randomly sampled 3D object. Part of the information that or model, excuse me, part of the information that our model has come from visual modality. If a camera look at this object from one point of view, the camera will see only a 2D image. Then the simulated robot hand touch or grasp the object with a randomly sampled wrist viewpoint to obtain the haptic information. Our environment is designed to simulate this process. The task the model needs to perform is to generate a 3D visual and haptic representation of the object from a variety of viewpoints. We formulate our 3D scene representation following the GQ and model by DeepMind for queryable representations, which is actually presented by Slami et al. So now imagine that we have some previous interaction experiences that we call them contexts, like visual experiences or haptic information. If we assume to have a representation that abstracts all previous experiences, we may be able to predict what the object would look like from a new viewpoint or observation using such a representation. So our goal is to train this conditional generative model to maximize the likelihood via a variational method. For the baseline model, we only use a single encoder that gets the sum of all modality encoders' outputs, like here vision and haptic. Since each sensory modality has different structure, a single shared context encoder won't be representative. Instead, we use product of expert or POE that's proposed by Hinton in 2002. In POE, each of the experts contain an integrated network combining the modality encoder and a complex inference network, like here ConvDraw. So, product of expert could be very computationally expensive. So we propose an amortized product of expert or APOE, in which the modality encoding and the inference networks are detached, and the inference networks are integrated into a single amortized network, which is computationally much more efficient. In this experiment, so here actually I'm showing you some of our experiments and results, qualitative results. In this experiment, we provide only single view visual input in A. As you see here, with the limited information, this is not really easy to infer the 3D shape of the object with just like having A. Then in B, we let the simulated robot to touch the object for a few times. Here D is the ground truth from multiple point of view of the same object, and C is what our model has generated. We can see the color combination that the model C in A is correctly captured and generated in C. The shape of the model is also learned and generated correctly. However, the colors that the model hasn't seen in the visual experience are not predicted correctly because of insufficient visual experiences. So let's talk about the next experiment. In this experience, the model still observed a visual input, which is a 2D image. But this time, initially, as you see in column 0, we are not providing any haptic information at all for the model. So the hand can't touch the object at all. You see the generated visual representations shapes are not matched with the ground truth, which is in the right column. Then each time haptic information is added by sampling the wrist view points from different points and different angles. And as the experience of the model increases, the generated visual representations get more accurate. These experiments are done to generate visual representation, but actually we also generated haptic information too, and this model can be applied for other modalities interactions as well. Here I talked about multimodal and multi-domain learning, as well as employing active learning to only annotating the most informative part of the data. These approaches, among many approaches, could be helpful on making computer vision problems more label efficient with regarding to human labeling effort and time. And last but not the least, thanks to all my collaborators and thanks to all of you for listening to me.